Let's go to Westminster, and the Premier League's chief executive Richard Masters has been questioned by MPs today after both Everton and Nottingham Forest were charged with breaking the league's profit and sustainability rules. Alongside him was the EFL chair Rick Parry. Let's join our senior reporter Geraint Hughes, who is in Westminster for us. Good afternoon to you, Geraint. What did Richard Masters have to say then when it was put to him that this whole situation, particularly regarding Everton in particular, was somewhat messy, shall we say?
Yes, and the questions that I think you're quite right describing it as a grilling for Richard Masters and for Rick Parry as well today. Not the first time they've been in front of MPs on a select committee, but even though they're actually called last week, the timing of the PSR breaches yesterday with Everton and Nottingham Forest, absolutely inevitable that the chair, especially the chair of this committee, Dame Caroline Dinenage, would ask questions, and she didn't really pull her punches in terms of the phraseology, the words she used in her questioning, describing the situation as messy with regards to Everton. She wanted a response from Richard Masters, the chief executive of the Premier League. He disagreed, as we will hear shortly, that it was a messy situation. Just to bring in some context of why she was using that kind of language. Obviously, yesterday we heard about that breach of profit and sustainability rules for Everton. That now goes forward into an independent commission, but that's off the back of them already being charged and deducted points on a previous charge back in November. So they're in this essence facing two very similar charges in the space of one season. So this was Richard Masters' response to that question from the chair of the CMS Select Committee.
The way that we have done it is that the points have been deducted pending the appeal. So whatever the appeal panel decides will then be, I'm assuming, the final deduction, and that will be, the asterisk will then be removed. So it doesn't really matter when it happens, as long as it happens in this season, and it will happen in this season.
But yesterday's second judgment on Everton includes the majority of the financial period for which they've already been sanctioned, in my understanding. I mean, do you accept? It's so messy, Richard. Do you not accept that this fundamentally demonstrates the urgency in which we need an independent regulator to manage cases like this?
I don't think it's messy. And no one, I mean, it's a very solemn duty, I have to say, and I'm sure that Rick would agree with me. Nobody likes enforcing the financial rules. It's the first time the Premier League has done it. And these financial rules were brought in 2013-14. They were brought in with the specific purpose, post-Portsmouth actually, of ensuring that unsustainable spending couldn't go too far, and so there was a wrapper put around how much clubs could invest in pursuit of their aims.
Geraint, I think one of the questions that will be on the lips of many Premier League fans is why this situation for Nottingham Forest and Everton is different from those for Manchester City and Chelsea, who, as we know, are also under investigation.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, inevitable when the opportunity for MPs to grill the likes of Richard Masters and Rick Parry, it's always an uncomfortable, well, hour and three quarters as it happened to be today for them. But it was inevitable that once we talked about Everton and Nottingham Forest and the PSR breaches that were revealed yesterday, a question was bound to be asked about, well, what's the difference between what's happening with Manchester City? The question was asked in relation, I think, to how fans are going to view this. How can they have trust in the process? How can they even understand this? Richard Masters, again, answering this question to the chair of the Select Committee. It was one of those answers where he did definitely, as you will hear now, he will give us some information we didn't know in terms of about the dates being set for hearings, but in terms of maybe any more detail on why there are differences. Otherwise, probably what we've already reported before about how many charges there are, 115 as opposed to just a PSR charge. The years they happened, it happened over a 9-season sort of series of years back, starting in 2008, 2009. So it's a different period. He was key to point out, before we hear from Masters, I think it's worth pointing out as well, is that many of some of the breaches, had they occurred now, as they had with Nottingham Forest and Everton, they would be under the same sort of PSR rule breaches. But because it happened a long time ago, so many breaches as well, 115 in total, that need to be addressed. That is the main difference. This is what Richard Masters, though, explained to the committee.
if any club, whether they're the current champions or otherwise, had been found in breach of the spending rules for full year 23, they would be in exactly the same position as Everton or Nottingham Forest. But the volume and character of the charges laid before Man City, which I obviously cannot talk about at all, are being heard in a completely different environment. There is a date set for that proceeding. Unfortunately, I can't tell you when that is, but that is progressing.
So, we know a date for the hearing has been set. We just don't know when that date is. We wait and see. Interesting as well today, it wasn't just a timely opportunity for MPs to talk about Everton, Nottingham Forest and Manchester City. They were actually, Rick Parry and Richard Masters were called in front of these MPs today to talk about and explain why there is a current stalemate between the two over a new financial deal. We had heard maybe just before Christmas that a deal had been struck, but it hadn't. MPs wanted to know what's going on, especially as we are very, very soon to be getting some legislation in this place where an independent regulator for men's football will come into place who will have the powers to enforce a deal. MPs today wanted to know what was going on that. I think what we got is that there are still some differences, small and few, however critical differences. And it was left to the Premier League and the EFL to go away in their various discussions and meetings to see if they can get closer to a deal before the independent regulator comes into force when it becomes law.
OK, Geraint, thank you very much for the update.